Being here. Ms. Jones, can I just come to you? We have heard an extraordinary number of lies told about this law from the President of the United States all the way down, certainly including members of this committee, including today, and also from an unbelievable assortment of for-profit corporations. This has been one of the most incredible organized campaigns by these mega corporations in American history to try to influence legislation and ultimately to overturn it. And of course, these same corporations are now taking this effort to states across the country, no doubt soon coming to mind, to the state of Missouri, where we have our election integrity measures adopted by our voters in our legislature, and also by referendum will soon, I'm sure, be in their sights. Let me just ask you about these lies that have been told over and over. The President of the United States, his big lie, that this legislation cut off the amount of time, closed the polls early. That was a lie. We've heard that water is not made available to people waiting in line. That's a lie. We've seen it told over and over and over. But I want to zero in on the corporations, their unprecedented power. Tell me, why do you think these corporations, so many of them, have been so eager to parrot lies that they know are not true? It's not like they don't have whole teams of lawyers. These are the most powerful corporations in the world. They have entire legal departments at their disposal. Why do you think they've been so eager to lie over and over about this law that your legislature adopted?
Well, thank you, Senator, for the question. I can't speculate precisely on their motivation, but I can say that if they do have teams of lawyers and people to analyze the bill, their unjustified outrage is really ridiculous. And I believe most of these corporations, if they read the bill and compared our voting laws to most of the rest of the state, they would know that Georgia has an expansive system of voting. We've made it more expansive. And I must clarify, Senator, that Georgians always have had, for decades, the ability to offer early voting, or not decades, as long as we've had early voting, the hours of up to 7 to 7. That continues to be the case. What we did was counties that offered fewer than 9 to 5 early voting hours, we've required them. 134 more counties will offer longer early voting. But it has been disappointing to see some, and I will just say it, some in the business community either not read the bill or feel that they would be punished somehow by some of these enormous nonprofit organizations that have placed a lot of pressure on them.
Let me just ask you about some of the pressure tactics that these corporations have brought to bear. We've seen in public what they have done. We've seen the statements that they have made and the lies that they've told. Tell me about the companies, what they've been doing in the legislature. I'm sure they have teams, fleets of lobbyists, just like they do here in this Capitol.
Right.
What are the sort of tactics that they have used there in the legislature to try to influence, intimidate? I mean, just give us a sense of what's been going on.
Well, I will say I worked closely on the bill and participated in the writing of every word of it. And I can say I was quite surprised by a couple of the companies' outrage, given that I never heard from a single one of them. And if they had, particularly, let me also say that by a couple of the chambers of commerce, the very provisions that they wanted retained in law were retained. And in fact, we went further by requiring now 2 Saturdays of early voting, whereas previously it was only 1 Saturday of early voting. So we expanded the ability for voters for early voting to vote, but yet I honestly, Senator, cannot explain their reaction other than to say they must fear some of these organizations that have an unbelievable amount of money. We've seen about $10 million spent already in Georgia inaccurately portraying this legislation. And as you know, if you say something often enough, however inaccurate it is, there are those that will begin to believe it. And so perhaps they've been influenced by that.
So what you're saying is that many of these corporations that are now howling in public and are spreading active disinformation in public and lies, they actually had nothing to say earlier, but now they are out there denouncing the law, calling it voter suppression, calling it Jim Crow, and when they had the opportunity to actually shape the bill or work on the bill, they didn't. But now they're mounting a public pressure campaign. Now they're saying they're going to go work in other states. Now they've changed their tune and are trying to ratchet up the pressure. Have I got that right?
Well, I would just clarify by saying that the few provisions, if the chambers of commerce were representing their interest and they were not communicating with us specifically, we retained those provisions, like 3 weeks of very expansive early voting, and in fact expanded the number of hours available. We kept no excuse early voting, which I'm sorry to say, Delaware in particular, the president's state, does not have, and it neither has early voting. So we retained the few areas, and I supported those provisions. What I mostly hear is not facts from those who are, to use your word, howling about the bill, but rather incendiary, just propaganda that doesn't at all align with the facts of the bill.
Mr. Garner, let me come just briefly to you and ask you here. Thank you, first of all, for being here, and just ask you about a statement you recently released about H.R. 1. You said, and I'm quoting you now, "Our state constitution requires that a voter must be present to vote unless a voter is absent from the town or city or physically disabled. This would also be taken away with H.R. 1. Contrary to our constitution, H.R. 1 would require no excuse absentee voting, early voting with multiple election days, and continuing to receive and count ballots after the election." Just give us a sense of why these provisions are that are in your Constitution are so important in your view for election security in your state.
Yeah. Just repeat the question.
Okay, was that for me?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, they're important for New Hampshire because it's what has made our turnout what it has been. It's a combination of the trust in the process and the ease of the process. If you take that away from New Hampshire, then we're not going to have the turnout that we have had over the years. And I had mentioned earlier that the conventional view that anything that makes voting easier will increase the turnout. But those charts that I've provided, you can see the facts. That is just not the case. You know, many academics say that Oregon is the state that is the easiest in the country. As everybody has mailed the ballot, they have multiple days, multiple locations. But when Oregon went to that process, they have had a lower turnout than New Hampshire, 7 presidential elections in a row. And before that, when they didn't have it, they were ahead of New Hampshire, 5 presidential elections in a row. And so the states are different. The states have integrity is important. The belief that the process is honest is important. It's a fine balance. And all the states try to attain that fine balance, trying to work with a process that keeps people trusting, because if they lose trust in it, they're not going to bother. If it's not of any value to them, it doesn't have anything meaningful for them anymore, they stop doing it. And we're always striving to reach that sort of mid-ground, that people can trust it, but it's also easy. And we've had the 3rd highest turnout, 4 presidential elections in a row based on voting age population. We were 4th, the presidential election before that. And you can see in the charts that I've given you, you can look at all the states. It works for New Hampshire.
Thank you,
This would
Senator.
take
Mr.
away.
Gardner, thank you very much for your testimony. We appreciate that. Senator Blumenthal?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'm intrigued by the argument that corporations should have